So there's this concept in user experience design called Jacob's Law. I'm not a user experience designer by trade, so if I'm kind of butchering some of this, feel free to correct me in the comments. But the idea with Jacob's Law is that users spend most of their time on other websites. This means that users prefer your site to work the same way as all of the other sites that they already know. Now, to explain a little bit further, what that means is like, okay, the logo goes to the top left, the shopping cart goes to the top right, that type of stuff. This is great. It's great that we have these patterns, and it's important that we understand these patterns, but and I'm not even saying anything specifically about this law, but what I want to talk about a little bit at the beginning of this video is just that we as an industry have taken, this thing that is a creative pursuit, which is building software and building kind of solutions for people, and have tried to boil it down to just, the least common denominator. And we treat everything like it has to work exactly the same way and look exactly the same way. In a lot of cases it should, right? You shouldn't be reinventing the wheel all the time, which is kind of the idea of this, right? If you were to give it a little bit more nuance, that's the idea. But it's not how a lot of people talk about it. As an industry, a good example of this, the fact that we have so strongly swung towards flat UI design for the last 10 or 15 years. When I say flat design, I mean the design of pretty much everything that you've used for the last 10 or 15 years. There's beautiful flat design. There's nothing wrong with flat design, but you end up getting stuff, and I'm not picking on this person. I mean, this application looks fine, but you end up getting a lot of applications that look very similar to something like this, where you have very clean, basic sans serif fonts. The icons go at the top left and the top right. You don't have any kind of depth in any of these icons. And I can understand how to use this application in 10 seconds, but it's not going to be particularly inspiring to me. And maybe that's not what I want. Maybe I just want a calendar application, but that's up for you to decide. And it's not up to just some set of rules of what the least common denominator kind of has proven out over the last 10 years to be into how your application should work or how you should be thinking about building things. There are no rules. You can do whatever you want. And even outside of kind of you can do whatever you want, there's plenty of priors for, different interesting design styles. And the most famous one is probably early iOS. So early iOS was all physically modeled, kind of skeuomorphic. When I say skeuomorphic, I mean it was modeled where applications were modeled to look and feel like real things, right? Like something like a notepad was supposed to look like an actual notepad. This served a very, very strong function in the early days of the internet because no one knew yet what these things were or how they were supposed to work. So we had to model them after real things. Same thing with the trash can icon, right? That is a standard now. That is, you drag the file down to the trash, and that feels like a real thing, and it helped teach people how to actually use different tools on the internet. Apple went from this back to, a very flat design, but they are starting to bring back more realism. So this is evident in something like liquid glass. If you look at what icons have looked like from iOS 18 to now, we went from these very flat icons up to these icons that have more depth like this, where you have light beaming in from either side, and you have more shadows and more depth, and even down to things like controls. So if you look at things like sliders, this isn't modeled after a physical, volume slider or something. It's like a water drop or something that kind of molds as you move it. But the idea is just that it's not purely flat and functional. It's made to feel a little bit more inspiring and interesting and give you kind of an idea, give you a brand specific feel for their products. One company that I think does this really well is a company called Not Boring. So I don't know if you guys have seen these guys before, but they make mobile apps. Their mobile apps are all kind of 3D physically modeled, maybe not specifically realistic, right? So I feel like it's something like their weather app. It doesn't look just like a physical cloud, but it does feel, it's not flat. It has more depth. It has more character. It has more specific feelings to it, or something like their camera application. So their cameras are made to look and feel and can be reskinned to feel like different types of physical cameras. It's not just functional, right? This isn't, not that this is difficult to use, but it's, not that least common denominator. Okay, it's vertical. You have the little button at the bottom, and then, your photos icon is here and your settings icon is here. It's made to look and feel more interesting and more creative, which makes a lot of sense for something like a camera application because you're doing a creative thing. You're trying to take photos that look good and give you a certain feeling. And when you have a thing in your hands that feels more inspiring, it helps you kind of get that across. Now, there's smaller examples of things like this and just normal UI design, like textures kind of coming back a lot, or these interesting border shapes are coming back a lot. Brian Chesky from Airbnb has been talking about this for years. I mean, I found this tweet from him from a couple years ago where he said flat design is over. Obviously, that's not entirely true. I'm looking at X right now, and there's still plenty of flat design. And even on Airbnb's website, they still have plenty of flat UI design, but they have these little elements that they're starting to bring back in that are interesting. So their icons, a lot of their icons use kind of physically modeled things things to get ideas across rather than just flat SVGs. And one kind of area of software that has understood this for a long time is music production software. So I want to talk a little bit about Propellerhead's Reason, which is a really popular music creation software. But before I do that, let's look at a couple of other examples. So you have things like Pro Tools. Not that you guys need to all understand how these things work, but Pro Tools is kind of the industry standard in music production for kind of audio mixing and mastering. It's like the corporate-y software, I guess. It's still physically modeled after things, right? Like you have sliders and you have knobs and stuff. But this is kind of like the king of professional audio software. Then you have things like Logic Pro, which looks and feels very, very similar. This is from Apple. You have things like Ableton, which work a little bit differently, but they still follow a fairly similar path, or Fruity Loop Studios, whatever. All these work relatively similar, at least in terms of like how they route different kind of tools and audio effects and things together. Reason, on the other hand, is completely different from that. So the way that Propellerhead's Reason works is it's modeled completely after physical audio racks, right? So if you want a synthesizer, they make it look and feel like a physical synthesizer that's sitting on a rack on your desk. And if you want that synthesizer to then go into an equalizer, you have to take the output of it and patch it with a cable into the input of some other, the other rack, right? Now, this is not the most efficient way to move about a piece of software, right? If you're probably not going to use this software for the same thing you're going to use Pro Tools for. You're going to use Pro Tools to mix music for Taylor Swift, right? You're going to use Reason because you're trying to just have fun and make interesting stuff and be creative, right? And they understand that, and that's why they build the tool the way that they do, right? They didn't go and say, well, how does Pro Tools do it? I should do it the way that Pro Tools does it because they kind of figured out the best way. No, they have millions and millions and millions of users who love them for working the way that they work, for solving the type of problem that they solve. And I think we're trending more back in that direction with some different web applications and things. Now that was really, really long-winded for a video where I'm just going to show you guys some basic CSS stuff, but I just wanted to get that across because I know that, as soon as anytime I start talking about things like this, people love to go like, oh, well, that's not the most usable thing. And you're right. Having something that looks like Propellerhead's Reason has a cognitive load, right? Jacob's Law would say like, you should not make something like this, but creativity says that maybe you should make something like this and the right type of person will find it and they'll learn how to use it. And it also doesn't even mean that things need to be difficult to use, but I'll stop kind of ranting. One example of a thing that I've kind of built recently, just that feels like kind of a thing in the real world. I don't have kind of audio on right now, but is this little board, this little kind of clackboard effect that is meant to kind of look and feel like a slat board display at like an old airport or something like that. This is all made with canvas and some stuff that's probably not worth kind of talking through right now, but you'll notice it has lots of little kind of bits of kind of realistic shading and things like that to try and make it look a little bit more real. And I think we can kind of talk through how you can make some types of things like this with something a little bit more simple like a button. So let's start with something like that. And then you can take those types of same effects and you can use it to go and make more interesting UIs if that's something that calls to you. So yeah, let's go and look at some code. I'll get my face out of the way and reset myself here. All right, so I've got a pretty basic code snippet here. This is literally just a button. There's nothing fancy, definitely not as fancy as something like a crazy UI like Propellerhead's Reason or something like that, even like that clackboard thing that I was showing you a second ago. But you still get a lot of the same ideas from something this simple that you'll need to build into something more complicated if you're actually trying to model something kind of physically in the real world. Obviously, you can go very, very deep. I am not, an actual artist, right? If I was trying to do something like model in 3D, a microphone or something using HTML and CSS, that'd probably be a little bit harder. But for simple little things like this, where you're just trying to make something like a button feel a little bit more three-dimensional and real, or something like that display I was showing a second ago, you can use just a couple of relatively straightforward techniques and kind of tack them together and start to give your UIs a little bit more depth and a little bit more character. So I'm using React and Toe and CSS over here. Obviously, you can use whatever you want. And the main 3 or 4 things that I'm going to be calling out here are gradients. So the use of gradients for kind of showing color, the idea of using kind of like layered and inset shadows, and the idea of using brightness, as well as like slight rotations and little adjustments to padding and things to give direction and a feeling of size. So we're going to see exactly what I mean by all of those. And we'll start kind of in the middle. So what I'm trying to model with this little button, and that's not how you always have to do it, but I'm pretending that the light is kind of coming from the top at a little bit of an angle down onto the button. So to show that, I have kind of lighter colors up near the top versus what I have down near the bottom. I'm also imagining that this button is kind of rotated a little bit. So to get that idea across, the top of this little bezel here has a little bit less padding than what I have down here on the bottom. And we can kind of go through and start seeing some of these things. So this up here at the top is the bezel, like I was talking about. When I say that, I mean the outline around the outside of the button. And I have a bit of padding around the whole thing, but then I'm bumping up a little bit more padding down here at the bottom. So this is a little bit thicker down here, which then goes with the fact that it's a little bit darker on the bottom. You can see if I say maybe make this 500 instead of 600, or even I guess I need to make both of these. There we go. Now it's the same color all the way around, and you can see it looks a little bit more flat. You don't get as much depth as you would if you had kind of this gradient going all the way through, where it feels like now the light is coming down from the top, hitting this up here, and then getting darker down here in the bottom. You'll also notice that I'm adding a little bit of a border between kind of the bezel of this button that I have here, like the inner part and the outer part. And this is using just a border. So if I come down here and I look at the border right here, I have a border, and the color of this border is a similar orange color, as opposed to using like a gray like would be using on something else. And the idea there is pretty straightforward, right? Is what I'm trying to get across is this is all one kind of piece of rubber or whatever material this kind of feels like it is. And this is a little bit of a divot kind of going in. Obviously, there's a million types of buttons. This is not like the only way to do it, but just to show you kind of what was going through my head whenever I was building this out, this is like a little bit of a crease in the button from the outside to the inside. And it's not going to be a gray color or something like a border that's used to separate things. It's more of a decorative piece to help kind of get across the idea that this button, whenever it's translated in, whenever I click it, right? So that's coming from right here. So this, whenever this is active, translate it down a pixel, but it gives that idea across a little bit more that we're actually pressing into something, and we have kind of this crease around the outside that's being pressed into. We have a similar idea with the background gradients on the actual main piece of the button. So if I just, so you can tell what this is actually changing, let me make it a different color. Let's make this gradient blue. So this is kind of the center piece of the button right here. And this is kind of giving a similar idea where I'm trying to say, okay, the color is coming from up here to down here. It's going to stay a little bit lighter because this middle part of the button in my head is sitting up a little bit higher than this bottom part of the button. Thus why you get that kind of indent whenever you kind of press it down. And thus why this bottom piece stays a little bit darker, because, you know, if the light's coming from up here, then it's going to be blocked a little bit from this middle part of the button. And all of this also kind of ties together with adding a brightness change based on whether or not I'm hovering or I'm kind of pressing into this. So what a lot of people would try and do whenever you do kind of like a click state or something like this, like an active state, is they would take their colors, like their actual physical colors, and they would change them. But that's not really what happens in the real world, right? Like you're really just getting less light. You're not changing the color. And you actually can do this with filters in CSS. So you'll see here I have this active. On active, I'm changing the brightness to 97%. And what this is doing is just adding a filter. So, you know, if you were to actually scroll through here and figure it out, it's just adding a filter property with a brightness of 97%, as opposed to actually changing like the color or the opacity or something like that. And then the last little trick that I'm going to talk about here is this little, you see I have this, what looks like a little bit of white border up here. I'm actually not using a border for that. I'm using this inset shadow right here. So if I remove this, you can kind of see what that looked like. So that's without it, that's with bringing it back. And the idea here again is to make it feel like there's a little bit of a lip here. Light again is coming down from the top, it's hitting this little lip, so it's a little bit brighter. But these inset shadows can be used for all kinds of stuff. So one other example, I'll scroll down here, is I have like these little switches over here. You'll notice that they look kind of like they're set back into the page. The way that I'm doing that is by adding an inset shadow, which an inset shadow can show you if I remove the inset. Right now, it feels like the shadow is going in towards the center of the object. If I actually remove the inset here, you'll see how it changes. Now it kind of goes down to the bottom, right? And it looks like it's outside of the button. You can layer these things on top of each other. You can make them whatever color you want. You can add, you know, multiple different like softnesses of shadow to give different amounts of depth. But they're just an extra tool that you can reach for to add things like outlines and add things like extra little bit of shading that sit maybe on top of the border or something that you already have. And that is honestly pretty much it. Like these same couple of little tools that I'm using here go together to make something like, you know, what I was showing you guys a second ago with this kind of big board thing that I made, right? Like if I scroll in on one of these cells, I have a little bit of different shading on the top pieces versus the bottom pieces. You know, there's shading between kind of the bezel from the top down to the bottom. There's kind of the inset little gray colors and things to make it look like it's outset a little bit. This one has some additional shadow on the outside to make it look like it's kind of sitting off of a wall or something like that. And you could even use these same concepts to keep building on top of each other to make something feel like whatever you want. I'm very excited to continue to see kind of the trend of UI design over the next handful of years. Things like not boring, like I was calling out earlier, I think are indicative of something we're going to start seeing more of, you know, more love put into the smaller pieces of applications, especially as we start to be able to build things faster and people are wanting to differentiate themselves more. But we've just spent so much time as an industry kind of hyper fixating on, you know, numbers and on just absolute optimization. And we've lost a little bit of that soul that I feel like we're kind of getting back. I'm not saying everyone should be making things, skeuomorphic. That's just kind of the framing of this video and something that I find interesting. It could be anything, right? There's trends in kind of new brutalism. There's trends in glassmorphism, obviously, with Apple and things like that. There's just more interesting kind of trends and UI ideas happening, kind of design pattern ideas, which I think are very, very exciting. And I'm excited to see where they continue to go. But yeah, that's pretty much it for me. If you guys got anything out of this, I would massively appreciate a like and subscribe. Check out my links down below for more kind of UI and front-end web development style stuff. And besides that, until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.